This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
If something ever happens to me, I want my kids to have life lessons from me. So I started drafting lessons for Jonathan. And it was on 2 categories, one on character and the other one on opportunity and risk. And I fronted it with a letter and I shelved it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Follow to Lead podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by Greg Fay Insurance. If you haven't talked to my man Greg Fay, do so today. Go to gregfayinsurance.com. Today on the podcast, former CEO Chris Greco. I love Chris. He's an author, a speaker. He recently came out with a book, 8 Steps to Overcoming Adversity. You're going to absolutely love his faith story and his leadership story and just kind of his no-nonsense approach to leadership. I love his heart for his faith and the people that have poured into him along the way. Also love the way he talked about his mom. A super sweet moment in the podcast. So now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Chris Greco. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have author, speaker, and former CEO Chris Greco. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
It's great to be here, Tony. Thank you for having me.
Man, you have done so many things in your life. You've written a book. You've been a CEO. Of course, you're a husband, you're a father, all the things. How would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
Well, I don't know if it's, it's definitely intentional, even though in my early years, I wouldn't have known it. I would say my calling is to lead. And lead with a faith-based purpose. When I came into the role of CEO as a first-time CEO, I wasn't quick to introduce faith as part of who I am, because you don't know how people will react. But as hard as running that company was in the beginning, so it was a turnaround, right? The company was headed towards bankruptcy when I took it over. The founder, a really good guy, came with a great product. But I had to make changes and organize the company and identify, their true north and get everybody aligned there. And just in my natural, I guess, way of leading and working with people, I would reference God. I'd reference praying for everybody, and it would just naturally come out. And people would kind of come into my office and say, "Hey, Chris, I'm glad you said that. That meant a lot to me." And they would share their faith. It wouldn't be everybody.
Sure.
It'd probably be less than half. But that was important. And then people got hold of my book, and they would go through the 8 steps, and they see that one of the steps is use prayer as a gateway between panic and peace. And they just, understood me, and I wasn't, overt about it. I think, when Jesus prayed, he prayed in silence. He kind of went away.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a great way to lead.
Yeah. Well, one of the terms that we use around here a lot is that it's sneaky Jesus, right? And so it's not like beat you over the head with that, and both work, right? Both have their merits and are valuable. I love the idea that your calling is to lead and to help others do the same. I'm curious, where does your definition of leadership come from? When you think about leadership and your experiences growing up in the corporate world and cutting your teeth before becoming a CEO, where did you learn leadership from?
From my mother. And she wasn't, when we lost my father, I was 15. My sister was, my brother was 4. My sister was 11. She was angry with God. She was angry, and I remember her pulling us in a few weeks after he passed, and he went to Catholic University. He was did a stint in the seminary. He taught my siblings and I everything about the Catholic faith, and we still live it today, which is a blessing from my dad. But he did not really, I think, shore things up, financially. It was a surprise. His cancer took him in 8 months. And so my mom was raising 3 kids. She believed in Catholic school, and she was not going to put us in public school after he passed. And she just picked up extra shifts. She said, "Look, I'm the revenue producer. I drive the monies in this family, and we all got to work together here. It's not a good situation, but we will come out of it." She says, "I'll deal with God when I see him and question his decisions. But right now, let's we have to work together as a family." And the Father Ron, he was my childhood priest. He was he kept me close to the faith, because I think that I probably would have maybe I was 15, 16 years old. I probably would have drifted if I didn't have very strong men around me. Even, believe it or not, my swim coach was Jewish, and he would tell me how often he would pray to God. So it was just part of God's plan for us to deal with what had happened. But in terms of where I learned my leadership skills was from my mother, and my mother was about providing support, taking care of her family, making sure she was always there for us, and really not being a transactional leader, but being a transformational leader, building, in this case, building 3 children into strong men and women.
When you think about grit, that's one of the things that I see a lot in your story is grit and perseverance. You're kind of known as loving the underdog. Talk to me about how leaders today can form that resilient kind of grit mindset.
I think they need to surround themselves. They need to create an environment where they surround themselves with those type of people, because it's easy. It's amazing how quickly your mind can work against you. Right, you almost pivot to when you're in the depths of despair. It's hard to pull yourself out. It takes a very, very strong individual to pull themselves, to call on God and pull yourself out of it. And I think that having people around you, creating that environment is just critical. So grit is the foundation to it, and it's amplified by surrounding yourself with the people who are of the same core, who have the same score.
That's how old were you when you ended up taking the company that you to market for sale?
How old? So I'm 52 now. So we sold the company a year and a half ago. I became CEO at 47.
That's crazy. And then how many kids do you have?
2.
Well, one of the things I'm always interested about is that I grew up in kind of a gritty environment in the city, taking the public transportation everywhere. My kids live in a very suburban, affluent area where we've been very blessed in the work that I get to do,
like my kids.
Coaching leaders. Yeah. And so I'm going where I'm going with all this is how do you create grit in the next generation, right? Because there's no reason for my kids to be nearly as gritty as I was. And I get the impression that maybe your story is similar.
I think, look, my wife and I both grew up from very humble beginnings. Everyone knows we kind of covered my story. Her story is both her parents are Cuban refugees.
Wow.
When Castro came in, and her grandparents were wealthy. They were business owners and engineers in Cuba, and the regime came in and took it over, and her parents came to the U.S. in their early teens with not much. In fact, they came on a program. It was called the Pedro Pan program, where the archdiocese essentially placed these kids in Catholic foster homes. So my father-in-law actually went from Cuba to Mobile, Alabama, and didn't speak a lick of English. And you know,
Wow.
he was 16, 17 years old, and he was just getting jobs and just trying to figure things out. And he raised a beautiful daughter. Owns his own home, his own cars. He's retired now. He can retire comfortably, and he built a life for himself that I think would be hard for most people to do. So I think that understanding where we came from is important for my children to learn. So we've spent a lot of time, almost every Christmas. They have a small house and small, nice, beautiful home in Miami where we go to, which is a third of the size of my home. So my kids understand that. They saw where I grew up. We do nice. We travel, but there's times where my kids will have a nice vacation, and sometimes just stay at home and we'll volunteer. And I do my best to provide that balance, and I pray to God that they have an appreciation for what my wife and I had built with them. But I think they have a level of humility. They work very, very hard, and they have an appreciation for all the things that they were given.
One of the interesting things when I talk to high level leaders like yourself and who are so close to their family is I'm always that whole thought process behind work-life balance. How have you kept your marriage in a good place while leading at such a high level with so many other things swirling around you?
It's been hard. No doubt. I mean, we spent, we've been married now 22 years. When I left the corporate world to go into my early growth stage journey with the goal of eventually running a company, which I achieved and probably will do again, I was traveling all the time. All the time. So my kids are doing well. I would say more in part because they have a great mother, in my wife. But I think the biggest thing is that we would communicate, and we would make enough time to spend time with one another, right? But I think early on. We did a lot of. It might sound cliche, Tony, but we would do a lot of date nights.
Yeah.
We would take our infant. We would take him out everywhere. We would eat out because once or twice a week, every week for a while, and it would just be she and I just talking, right? And then I try to do the little romantic things, and text messages now and then, that phone call when I'm traveling, and then when I get back, it's time with one another. So, but don't make no mistake about it, it's not easy, right? But ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship, right? Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship, as Denzel Washington says.
One of the interesting things about your story is that you've been able to shift multiple times in your career, the right yeses, the right nos. I'm always curious how faith-based leaders discern the right yes. Like, how did you know when they offered you that CEO role? Like from all accounts, from my research, that company was not in a great place when you took it over. I don't try not to speak too far, get my, say too much, but it was kind of, you had a turnaround job ahead of you. How did you know it was the right yes?
Because it was based in Kansas City. And I had just come off of 7 years of domestic and heavy international travel. So, and my kids were now in a place where they're in they still weren't, let me see. Yeah, they were 10 and 6 at the time. And so they were getting into sport. Like I want to be around, right? So that was a factor, right? That was A, and B. I'll be honest. There were not a lot of executives that was going to take that job because the company was in such a bad place, and the bet was not on banking on a guaranteed compensation package. The bet was if we scaled it, then there'd be a good outcome, right? In terms of compensation and all the other great things that come from turning around a company. But I really love the industry. The idea of helping your neighborhood grocer be successful and not allow them to succumb to a Walmart or a Dollar General or an Aldi taking away their business and shutting them down, which was happening. Believe it or not, I thought the industry meant a lot, but as a first CEO, it was something that I aspired to, and there's just not a lot of those types of jobs that are out there that were in Kansas City, and it was just like my instinct said, just do it. And I also had good advisors, very good advisors, saying, Chris, this will be a stepping stone to your next thing. And I can tell you that I was there for 4 years. The way I view business now and view working with people is totally different than before in a very, very good way. So I'm really blessed to have had that opportunity, and I'm glad to have left the company in a better place than when I found it.
How did you know when it was time to leave?
Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
Well, that's a great question. So, when private equity comes in, they usually have a bench of people they want to bring in, and their goal was to go ahead and acquire other companies. And so I remained on board. I was remained on board for a year. Actually, went to a year and a half. And the conversation came about when I did what I had to do. The goal was to go ahead and get it to a place, a level where someone would pay a multiple. They paid the private equity firm that acquired us paid a 6x multiple for the company. This was in 2023. That's pretty good. So I did what I had to do, and private equity always has a very, very heavy hand in running the company. That's not meant to be disparaging. It is what it is. I just wrote an article that just posted actually today on LinkedIn called "The Essence of Raising Capital," or the essence of raising money, which is my experience of the before and after with bringing on a new institutional investor. And so I got the experience, and also my son is now a senior. He is definitely going away out of state for school. He just has very strong academics, aspires to go to the military, and I wanted to be in a position where I had a lot of free time to spend time with him. My daughter's a golfer. We got, after I, stepped away, I was able to spend, 2 days a week over the summer with her on the golf course. And, now she's shooting sub 90 as a 14-year-old in golf.
Wow.
I think that's pretty good. And we did a bunch of vacations, and I'm doing advisory roles, and I'm also have time to really focus, on my book. Cause when you're a CEO, you can't even, it's hard to really even podcast. Mm-hmm. It really is frequently. It's hard to, think about putting the framework around my next a second book, which I'm doing right now, and I've been doing some keynote speeches, which takes a lot of preparation, and I just wanted to have this experience because it's been a personal ambition for me to get my book, out there, and I wasn't able to do that because the book I wrote launched in June of 2020, and I became CEO in August of 2020. So the book pretty much was sitting on the shelf for almost 4 years.
Side note, where does your son want to go to college at?
He wants to go to the Naval Academy.
My son is there. He's a plebe.
Oh, wow. Then I got to connect him there. We got to connect.
For sure.
Yeah, he actually did the summer seminar as a junior.
Okay,
yeah.
That's what my son did, the exact same thing. In between his junior and senior year, did the summer seminar, and then
awesome.
we'll talk more. We can talk more about that later. Yeah. When you talk to me about the process of bringing this book to life, because it's not really a self-help book as much as it is a book that's full of stories and lessons, and it's about positioning mindset in a certain kind of way. Talk me through the creative process.
Yep. Well, it started out as I was traveling so much, right? And air travel is the safest travel there is. But, I'm traveling so much, I'm like, you know what? If something ever happens to me, I want my kids to have, life lessons from me. So I started drafting, because my son was older, I started drafting lessons for Jonathan. And they're and it was on two categories, one on character and the other one on opportunity and risk. And I drafted them. And I fronted it with a letter, and I shelved it. And then it was probably like a year, maybe a year later, I was gonna leave a corporate job to join my best friend who was building up his second company. And then, I was like a month away from leaving, and I get a phone call that he died in a car accident. And I got there, I get on the plane, I get there, our wives are friends. We spend Easters and Thanksgivings together. We were that close. And his wife had me give the eulogy, and my wife flew in, and I give the eulogy, and I'm walking back from the podium. I just look at my wife. I said, I got to write this book. I just keep talking about it. So I just programmed three, four mornings a week, and just took those lessons and said, okay, what would people need to know about overcoming adversity, and how would I make that relatable to everyone? And so I just leaned on my story of how, as a 15-year-old kid, dealt with an untimely death of my father. Still was able to pursue my skills, still helping support my family. And that culminated into 8 steps. I didn't say it's got to be 7 or 8. I said, what are the steps? Was it 4? Was it 8? Was it 20? Came out to be 8. And that was essentially it took about 2 years. And it's hard. It's I really have a mad respect for authors, because to write a good book, you don't make money doing it. Right. Be clear. Book writing, you're not going to make
a labor of love for sure.
Labor of love. It's a big labor of love. But look, my kids now have something forever, and that was the purpose. And now I get like emails, and I got people kind of reaching out and saying, hey, Chris, I read your book in like 2 hours. I got to tell you, it resonated with me. Right, it has like almost 60 reviews now, on Amazon. It's been growing, and so look, if it's helping people, then I think I'm doing them a good service.
Hey guys, just pausing this conversation with Chris to remind you to check out some of our incredible partners. Trent over at the Barga team wants to help you find your next home, whether that's vacation home, forever home, or a rental home. Talk to Trent today. Also, go to his YouTube page to stay up to date on what the market is doing. He's putting out great content there on a regular basis. Visit thebargateam.com and tell him that Tony sent you. Now, let's finish up this conversation with Chris. I'm always curious when someone who, like you, who's been in a role for so long, like you've led for so long, and now you do that switch to do the deep work of writing a book. And I know you did it for your son, but it took multiple years. What did you learn about yourself in the process of the writing?
That time is precious. Time is precious, right? I wrote it while leading a European sales team, building a European sales team for a cybersecurity company. And so my downtime was either spending time with the family or writing. Those are really what I was doing. So time is and there's the biggest thing I learned, there's no solutions, only trade-offs. Because I wasn't able to my morning reflection, that was a trade-off. I wasn't able to sit, I usually my routine is I wake up, I give gratitude, I listen to, readings, I reflect, I think. I was writing. Wow. That's from like 5 to 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. for 3-4 mornings a week. That was the process. I had to commit to that. And I wasn't able to do my morning routine. My routine was to write, and because that's when I recognized where I had the greatest clarity and I had the most undisrupted time.
That's good. I want to go through that. I'm going to do a quick read a quick summary of the 8 steps, because I think it's important for people to kind of get a glimpse of what they are going to pick up in the book. I'll do that. And then I'm going to ask you which one's the hardest for you. So let me read them real quick. Okay. Number 1, affirm, I'm not a victim. Number 2, accept adversity as necessary step on your personal path to progress. Number 3, develop a self-sufficient mindset. Number 4, establish a routine. Number 5, convince yourself that you can learn and do almost anything. That one's my favorite, by the way. Yeah. Number 6, help the person next to you. That's my second favorite. Number 7, use prayer as a gateway between panic and peace. And number 8, share your story and mentor others. Yep. So out of those 8 steps, which one is the one that you still struggle with? Like, what's the hardest one, and what about it makes it so hard?
I number 5.
Yeah.
Right? Convince yourself that you can learn and do almost anything. I mean, we have, that comes, I think I quote Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Growth Mindset, and she talks about the difference between fixed and growth mindset. Growth mindset believes that you could, learn and do almost anything. It's just hard because you fall back on I guess it's called your lowest common denominator skill. And, God, look, here's what I would say about what God did to all of us. There is no one that is like you that came before you, and there is no one like you that will come after you.
That's good.
Think about that. That is a massive gift. That speaks to our uniqueness as humans. And we got to capitalize on that. And we were put on this earth for a purpose. So we have to go find it. And I think that, part of it is, if we're put on this earth and we're like a debit card, then we gotta cash out that entire card that God gave us, right? I mean, we have to leave it all in the field, all in the earth. And I think that we have to find a way to really understand, our purpose and then reach our full potential. And so, convincing yourself that you can learn and do almost anything, is a big deal. I mean, when I became, first time CEO, I know there's 1 or 2 other candidates that were existing CEOs. And the one board member that bet on me actually read my book. Wow. And he said, Chris, it brought me to tears, but what, it told me that you were the right person for the role, because I didn't need an existing CEO that knew the function of leadership. I needed somebody that was resilient, that would be able to deal with the current setbacks and be able to take on the other setbacks that were coming. And he said that right in front of me, in front of the board. And then, a few days later, an offer came, and I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be it for a while.
That's so good.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Yeah.
Now that you're kind of living in this content creator space, and the book is really starting to make some progress getting out to the masses, since you have time to focus on it. Yeah. I always love to hear from leaders. What is your prayer for this book?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that question before. My prayer for this book is that it continues to give people to make people realize that they have a incredible amount of God-given capabilities that they need to capitalize on.
That's so good.
Right? That they have so many capabilities that they haven't even tapped that they can leverage to overcome anything that they're facing. You know, I tell in my keynote in the book, and I now bring it in my keynote speeches, is that I ask everybody whether they want to do it. They want to draw the circle or they want to do it in their head. I said, draw a circle, and then add every dot for any setback, hardship, adversity that you have. Whether it's an everyday adversity, whether it's a temporary setback, or whether it's a permanent life-changing event. Just keep adding the dots. And then I say, now take a step back and look at it. What do you see more white space, or do you see more dots in your circle? And I said, hold it up. And I say, I see more white space. And that white space represents, it's a way to look at life, that you have more white space of hope and capabilities than you have what I call tiny dots of doubt. And because every single setback, it drives doubt. If we don't overcome it, Tony, then it limits our mindset to tackling the next setback which will come. So we have to embrace it. We have to embrace the struggle, embrace the adversity, and understand that, hey, no matter how bad it gets, God gave me the capabilities to overcome it.
That's beautiful. I have two more questions for you. One's simple, one's not. But before I ask either of those, I know that the podcast family is going to want to connect with you all over the internet. Where is the best place to learn all things Chris and how they can get connected with you? And if they want to book you for a keynote, and I know you're doing that all over the place, where's the best place to do those things?
It's simple. Go to grecospeaks.com. www.grecospeaks.com, GRECO speaks.com. And what they could, and there's a simple form on there. My email address is on there. They can get me pretty easily. I'm very responsive, and they should be able to find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, pretty much all over social media. I'm starting to build that up a bit more, but the best place is to go to my site, grecospeaks.com.
Awesome. I love it. And we'll link to that in the show notes too. And if there's anything I can do to help you get connected with Chris, let me know.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the simple question. What's the teaser for your second book?
Motherhood, believe it or not.
Okay. All right. I'll bite. Tell me more about it.
Yeah. So, I have a couple ideas for the book. I actually have two, I would say, frameworks for my next book. And one of them is focused on the leadership lessons that, motherhood can teach us. And I was inspired by, there was a speaker, very well known. I won't give out his name just yet. But there was a woman who stood up and said, I really want to serve in the military, but that's my life goal. But, I want to be, a great wife and a mother as well. And I won't feel accomplished, if I'm not able to serve in the military. And then the gentleman was very quick to say, wait a minute. Motherhood is a massive achievement.
Wow.
Think about this. I mean, think about what my mother did. I mean, I became a CEO. I mean, there's no way when I was watching my childhood priest giving my father his last rites that I ever would have thought I'd be living in a 5-bedroom home, having a vacation home, being able to go to, mass several times, a week, raising 2 beautiful kids, having a beautiful wife. Never would have thought of that. My brother served 3 tours in Afghanistan as an Apache pilot. He came out of the military as a major. My sister followed in my mother's footsteps as a critical care nurse, and she cut her teeth at probably one of the best places in the world, which is Massachusetts General in Boston. I mean, think about what my mother was able to, a working mother was able to do. So I think there are many leadership lessons that everyone can learn from a working mother. That I think is important, and I think it's like one of the best forms of leadership that I know of, because I look at why I've been successful, and I find myself, my mother, passed away in January this year, and my siblings and I have been reflecting, on all the things that she gave to us, right? All the things she gave to us, and in her, and I would call on her lessons, leading the CEO. So I think the next book is going to be something around that. I might have to post it as an article first, see what type of feedback I get.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about it.
All right. Well, promise me you'll come back on when you write it.
Yes, I'll do that. You got it.
All right. I love that. Okay. Last question, a little more harder than the first one. I want to invite you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the season of life you're in.
Okay.
I want to take you back to the day after your wedding. Almost 23 years ago, you're sitting knee to knee with that younger version of yourself.
Yeah.
You look that young man in the eyes. You hold his hands. He just said yes to the love of his life.
Yep.
He's about to go on this crazy adventure. What piece of advice are you going to give that young man about the journey that lies before him?
Be patient. Things are going to happen in God's time, not your time. And it is a fact. I did not. There's no way those words left my lips for years. Early in my marriage, and I have a great marriage. I think my wife would say that if she was. I mean, we do. I'm really blessed. But patience. I think it's not just a lesson for me. It's for anybody. If we can really embrace and understand that God has a plan for us. Jeremiah 29.
Yeah.
Okay. Rejoice in hope. Endure in affliction. Persevere through prayer. Romans 12:12. You think about those are probably the two most powerful verses that I can recite. If we really understand that God has a plan for us, then we can be patient and just wake up every day and live the way we think that we think is best to honor Him for the life He gave us. So I would say that patience is the key operative word here. Going back to my 29 or 30-year-old self.
That's amazing. Chris, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. What a great conversation. I love your heart for the Lord and for business leaders everywhere, and I just deeply appreciate the amount of time and energy that you gave us today.
Yeah, this is great, Tony. You're a great interviewer. I enjoyed it, and you run a great podcast, so thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed the time.
Loved this conversation with Chris, especially liked the way he talked about being patient and about saying the right yeses and what it means to walk by faith in the midst of all of that. Some powerful stuff there. Do me a favor, find Chris on LinkedIn, go to grecospeaks.com, let him know that you heard him here on the podcast. Every time you do that, every time you share the podcast, every time you tell someone about Follow to Lead, you are giving me the opportunity to continue to do what I love to do. And I'm forever thankful for that. And I'm thankful for you, the podcast family. As always, if there's anything I can do for you, I'm embarrassingly easy to find at TWMilt on Instagram or Tony@TWMilt via email. Thank you guys so much. And remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.